I don't see the biggest problem as a issue with the financial system. The issue is that most people don't understand it, right? And if I look sort of like cross sector at my network, my community throughout Canada, north or south, the border down in the States, I would point to the majority of expressions of civil unrest that we've seen since, the last 15 years at least, due to a lack of understanding about how money works, right?
Hey guys, it's Bronson Hill. I had the chance to interview the amazing Jay Martin recently. You might know Jay from the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference in Vancouver, Canada. I'm going to be there in January. Hopefully you'll make it as well. And he also has his amazing YouTube channel where he has great guests talking through the financial system, what's happening today, and really about personal sovereignty. And in this interview, we talk a lot about personal sovereignty and really what are the problems with the financial system and how to be able to fix it. If you want to see the full interview, it's down in the links below. We had Russell Gray and Brian London, two other amazing guys having a full interview of this. So really excited for this interview. I think you're really going to enjoy it.
And it's kind of crazy that we go through 13 years of education and never touch on issues like credit, interest rates, capital gains, leverage. And as a consequence, you graduate from this system, you jump into life. Only a small percentage of people know how the world operates. And then we all wake up at 30, and a lot of people wake up at 30 and they look at the Monopoly board and they're like, how did those few people get so far ahead of me? They must have cheated. So this can't be fair, right? And we get into this cycle. And, I got 3 young kids, so I think about this a lot, right? And I think that there's a lot of issues with our financial system. Yes, there's manipulation. Yes, there's corruption. Yes, there's a lack of transparency and accountability. But I don't think those are financial system flaws. I think those are human flaws. And I think as long as we're running this, those things are coming too, right? And I'm not sure if there's can it be improved? Yes, definitely. Is there a system where we lack those issues? I don't think so, right? And so, in any expression of like a true free market, there's still going to be manipulation because there's going to be a subset of humans that are just a little bit smarter and a little bit more competitive than the rest of us, or the rest of some people. And they will manipulate a subset of the population to their own gain. And that's competition. And that's, call it whatever you want, but it's also advantageous. It's a positive attribute of human nature that we're very competitive as a species. And so when I look at the financial system, the problem is, from my standpoint, is that people generally are not educated about it, right? And when you don't understand something, it's mysterious, it's intimidating, you hesitate to approach it, right? And as a consequence, the majority of people, I think, have a lot of misunderstandings about, why things work out the way they do. Right? Does that make sense?
So Jay talks about being aware of the pundits, right? Pundits are people that get on TV, the talking heads telling you what you should do, what you shouldn't do. You should follow all these investing rules. And he says that, making investment rules is easy, but following them is difficult, right? So now he gets into some advice and kind of what he sees are really some opportunities coming up here in the new year.
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind. I mean, you hit on one. You said there's like a doom and gloom camp over here and perpetual bull camp over here, right? And it's a trap, right? And there's a large business around selling financial commentary, and investors need to be super wary of that. And when someone's pitching you a crash thesis, it typically sounds like they're trying to help you, right? Things are going to get really bad, but here's what I can do to save you, right? Whereas when someone's pitching, a bull market outcome, it sounds like they're trying to sell you something, right? So people tend to gravitate towards getting help rather than being sold. And so the doom and gloom camp always wins in terms of mass and volume. Plus, fear narratives just sell really well. But I'm with you. Things are never as bad as we forecast them to be typically. And, Russell said it, the system might be doomed, but we're not doomed. And I completely agree with that. We're going to go through a massive transformation and things might get pretty sticky. Like I'm not, my business right now is purposely built super, super lean and agile. My portfolio is incredibly barbelled. I'm hyper conservative, primitive hard assets, metal and land. And over here, I'm highly, highly speculative, and I got nothing in the middle. I like the super high risk and the super, super boring. I'll bet all day long on human ingenuity, and we'll get through this into some new version all day long. I'm an optimist eventually, right? There's just going to be some pain in any sort of growth period or transition period. What can people do? I think it's like really important. So I'm a retail investor. My audience is just like me. They're retail investors. And they tune in as we go through having conversations with people who have made more money in the sector than I have. And I'm just there to steal their best ideas. But what I would tell you that I've learned as a student in this sector myself through my podcast is that, the perpetually successful investors that have survived market cycle after market cycle, they all have very specific rules. And creating them is the easy part. Following them, that's way harder, right? When you get caught up in the emotion of, a rising or a falling share price. So, maybe rule number one is stay alive, right? And that's hyper important because it's really easy to get excited about a new idea, hear consensus from your network or whatever gurus you're following and get way overconfident, right? And people often get burned out. They get into a FOMO trade and they get wiped out more than they can afford, right? And so advice, I would say, work on the boring box first, right? And once you've got that boring box ticked, right? The gold, the silver, the land, I put cash in that box. You can question that, but I like having dry powder available to me. If it's in US dollars, that's where it's parked right now. But until that is incredibly robust in the sense that I know me and my family are good in that crisis scenario, then I can go gambling. And I like to gamble and, I invest in startups and early stage mining companies, right? I'm in the spec and the venture sector. And so, determine what kind of investor you are is number one. And the way you get there is to determine how much time you have to invest in being an investor, right? We saw this surge of day traders and swing traders over the last 2 years. And most people don't actually have, first of all, that's a tough game to win at, very, very tough. And the very few people that actually beat the market cycle after cycle are so rare that they're household names, right? That's just a fact, right? There's not very many Michael Jordans or Ray Dalios, but we know who they are. And so determine how much time you have to invest in being an investor consistently, not this week or this month, but over the course, because it's going to take years to compound results. And if you have 3 hours a week, don't try to be a day trader. Don't try to be a swing trader, right? Figure that out, right? I have about 2.5 to 3 hours per day. That's my market time. My business and my family eat up the rest. That's perfect for a value investor, right? But I would never try to day trade, right? But it's perfect for me to look at select opportunities, due diligence, feel good about where I'm at, check in on those opportunities, visit the portfolio. But it's rule number one is, and if you don't know what kind of investor you are yet, if you can't answer that question, figure that out first. That's step one.
So one thing he talks about here in this section is really finding out what's right for you. And that's really what personal sovereignty is, right? Educating yourself, making a plan for yourself, and really following it. It's not a one size fit all. You have to figure out what your goals are, what you want to do, and really following down that path. So the thought leaders are not always correct for what you should be doing. So I asked Jay in this next part, what really does end the Fed mean? Is it possible? Is it something that we can do? So that's what I asked him, and we'll see what he said here.
Sure. Yeah. To your first question, is it possible to end the Fed? Yes, right? Probably. And what's life look like after that? I'm not sure, but whoever's at the top, I guarantee you they have a lot more bullets in the chamber to fight and keep that spot. And I wouldn't count on that going away anytime soon. But I base my whole show around the fact that I have no idea what's around the corner. And so therefore, in the event of some kind of great reset, what do things look like on the other side? I think the only honest answer that I can prepare for is that I have no idea. But I can prepare for that, right? That's easier to prepare for. It's easier to prepare for uncertainty as long as you acknowledge that's the most likely thing to occur, which is probably it. And to me, that looks like personal sovereignty and optionality, right? And so, I already mentioned this, but it's how do you retain that sovereignty in an anything goes scenario? There are unlimited variables that will come into play. I think the next, the remainder of the 2020s are just going to be how the 2020s have been so far, just continued, unprecedented, unpredictable events. And I think the biggest ones are still to come. That's what I believe. So, what's it look like on the other side? I'm not sure, but I think things are going to get a lot crazier in the next few years before we get to some semblance of common normalcy. And so I like to take myself out of the equation, right? Russell said it. How do you fix the financial system? You fix your financial system. You can do that. That's within your power to do. And that's something you can start today with whatever resources you have available to you. Everybody has the potential to achieve some kind of savings, right? Typically, savings is just the gulf between your ego and your income, right? Typically, there's some space there. You can depress your ego a little bit. You might find some space between that and your income. and start accumulating off-grid assets. I don't give advice, but that's what I'm doing, right? That's what I'm doing. And I like that I have that sovereign wealth in the form of metal, in the form of real estate, in the form of cash. It's also very, very empowering when you organize your life that way. When I know, for example, I have a lot of physical metal, right? I'm from Vancouver, Canada. It's not weird to do that up here. It's never been weird. It's a gold town. But as a consequence, recently, I found a seller in distress selling a condo in a building in a location in my town up in Squamish that I really wanted to buy. And I broke one of my rules. I sold some of my gold in order to purchase this condo. So what I did was write myself a promissory note. The gold had to be paid back by January 1st with interest. Now I'm executing on that plan, right? And it's up to me whether or not I default on my own loan, but I'm choosing not to. But that's very empowering to know that you can be your own bank. And it's just one example, but what it does is give me the confidence to know, right? When I've got the treasury full, it just gives me the confidence to know I can weather a storm and I can be in control when the world is out of control. When you feel confident and in control, you just think better. You think proactively instead of reactively, right? If you're against the ropes, over levered, at the victim of the wind or whatever you want to say, like you're reactive, you're thinking short term, you're thinking from a survival mindset. But if you start accumulating whatever that safe haven, whatever that war chest looks like for you, maybe it's just cash, maybe it's owning your principal residence, maybe it's buying gold, doesn't matter. But when you start accumulating that war chest, it gives you the confidence to be faced with a crisis and stay calm and be patient, right? And wait. Often doing nothing's the best trade, right? Instead of reacting to circumstances immediately because you feel like you have to, right?
So now Jay gets into a little more detail on personal sovereignty and optionality, having the option to do what you want to do when you want to do it, and also just freedom that if things, go terrible in the financial system, you have choices, right? He talks about precious metals, and again, if you live in Canada, you're used to that. It's much more open to metals. It's interesting, the Vancouver Resource Investing Conference has over 5,000 attendees. I was at the New Orleans Investment Conference, had about 800 people. So it just shows a little bit, hey, it's just generally a much more accepted thing to get into natural resources such as precious metals and other areas of the world, especially where they mine them. So really, having a plan for being certain that things are going to be uncertain, right? So you can plan for that. And he talks about making a plan, knowing that things are not going to be predictable, having that. And he talks about getting started, just buying even 1 ounce of silver and then creating plans from there. And now he's going to get into talking about central bank digital currency and where we are headed in the future.
Can I just add one last thing onto that, Bronson? Because
Sure.
I imagine if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, it must be nice that you have a safe full of gold. Let me just clarify, my first purchase was 1 ounce of silver, right? It's incremental growth that compounds over time if you're consistent with the game plan, right? Back to what kind of investor are you? How much time do you have to invest in being an investor? The question is, over time, how much time do you have to invest? And building that war chest, it's a lifelong process, right? It didn't happen like this. It won't ever happen like that, right? Compound interest, right? That's it. Just think about this as a life plan. Your financial plan should be a lifelong time horizon. Well, I think they're definitely coming, in some way, shape, or form. Payments Canada is open about this on their website. They're actively working on a central bank issued digital currency. They have no plans to roll it out, but if and when circumstances required it, they want to be in a position to do so. And so, yeah, I expect some version of this. And I think it's going to be people on this call, on this panel. We may have reservations. Look, I do, but it's going to be an incredibly easy sell to the general public, right? It's we're, and people have been conditioned, over the last 5-10 years to navigate the cryptocurrency and digital currency space. So it's not so much of a shock. And if and when, we get to a place where a transition like that is being forced, it's as simple as incentivizing the population with a small amount of money in that account to go ahead and make that shift. And people will do it. People will do it for sure. The two biggest concerns people tend to have about CBDCs are surveillance and control, right? The surveillance thing, I get, honestly, I kind of think that ship has sailed, to be honest with you. I operate my life off my mobile phone, my laptop. everything I type is being recorded, right? We know this now, right? If I'm speaking within audio reach of my phone or my laptop, I'm being listened to just so my tech can hear, just in case I say, hey, Siri, it's got to hear everything to hear those words, and most apps that we have full access to the files on your phone, keyboard access to see what you're typing. This is blah, blah, blah. We know all this stuff, right? So like a little bit more surveillance on the back of CBDCs, it's not good, but it's the autonomy, losing the autonomy over your cash is the bigger risk that I see, right? Where you can actually, programmable money allows you to incentivize people to spend there and not spend there, or just to spend because your cash discounts at 10% every month or whatever if it's not spent, right? And these things I think are super realistic to expect. There was a question in the chat about, I don't have it in front of me, but it was like, how do you leverage your precious metals in a CBDC environment, right? Because there would be absolute surveillance on how every dollar is transacted. And, Brian and Russell touched on the importance of understanding how to barter. It's not front of my radar, but I think it's super important. But more important is like, I don't know the answer to that question. How do I leverage my precious metals in a CBDC environment? I don't know, but I do know that I'm going to want the optionality to do so, right? I'm going to want to have that ace up my sleeve. And so I don't need to know how I would leverage my precious metals. I can look at history and say, well, what has survived the rise and fall of hundreds of empires and thousands of market cycles? It's precious metals, right? And land, like it's hard assets. And so that's enough for me to make that bet with confidence that I don't know exactly how I'm going to have to navigate that world, but I want as much optionality as possible. On that note comes my conference in January in Vancouver, British Columbia. We're January 29th and 30th, and it's strictly natural resource focused. And so we'll have about 300 junior mining companies there, and a handful of stages. And we're doing the same thing that I'm doing on my podcast. It's like trying to find value, trying to find places, good homes for capital. Rockstar lineup of guests. It's super fun. We put that business on pause during the pandemic, obviously, and I was really sort of on the fence about resurrecting it because the media business is way more fun, to be honest, and simpler, right? Less risk, all these right things. But we just, with the state of the world, it's you can't not do it. You can't not do it right now. There's so much to talk about. Like if you don't love macro today, then just forget it, right? There's enough going on right now to keep anybody interested. So all of our information is at cambridgehouse.com. That's, you can find out about the event. I publish 3 pieces of content per week on my YouTube channel and my podcast, and I write a weekly newsletter. That's my favorite thing that I do. And I think it's just jmartin.club is the landing page to sign up for the newsletter, or the Jay Martin Show on YouTube and Spotify.
So Jay talks about central bank digital currencies. He says the privacy issue, the ship has sailed, it's already done. I agree and disagree. I think that there are things that we still do have some privacy that if they were to do away with cash, having no privacy in any transactions, I think is difficult. Obviously, the government is in our business. Depending on where you live, it's more or less in your business. But really, the importance is educating yourself on a macro level. So I appreciate you being here to educate yourself. His conference, the Vancouver Resource Investing Conference, is the 29th through the 30th of January. Again, I will be there. I hope you are there. If you are there, let me know. We can connect. And then I have this ebook I wanted to share with you. This is How to Use Inflation to Your Advantage. There's a link down below. You can check it out. It's 52 color pages. There's all kinds of strategies and things you can do, like what we do in multifamily investing and other sort of alternative assets, such as ATM machines, which is against the counter argument to central bank digital currencies, as well as some other speculative oil and gas type of deals. So love to get connected with you. Love to find out what you're doing. Maybe stick in the comments what you found most valuable from this video, and look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks.